Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the sun-drenched world of Greek myth, where even the most glamorous gods sometimes end up doing the most unexpectedly boring jobs. Imagine this. You're Apollo, yes. That Apollo, god of music, sunlight, medicine, poetry, plague, awkward, and overall golden boy vibes. You're used to sun chariots, divine flirtations, and casual harp solos on marble balconies. And now, you're grounded. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally grounded, by Zeus no less. You probably won't survive this, unless you're very into cows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love seeing where people are listening from. So let me know your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down the foothills of Mount Olympus with sandals full of dust and a prideful headache the size of Delphi. The sunlight, which usually obeys your divine command like a loyal puppy, now seems passive-aggressive. Too bright, too hot, and frankly, a little judgy. Your crime? A bad temper, a bad bet, and a bad attitude. It started when you took offense to a mortal's music. A satyr, actually. Half goat, all sass. The musical duel was glorious, sure. But your punishment was not. The gods voted. Zeus, naturally, didn't side with his golden boy this time. The sentence? 1 year of mortal labor. No shortcuts, no lightning-fast errands, no turning into a hawk and flying away dramatically. You must live among the humans, disguise your identity, and, because irony is eternal, serve as a humble cowherd. Herd, cows, you, Apollo. The guy who literally invented the lyre and casually defeated Python the dragon. The god of the sun now reports to a mortal king with muddy boots and a very specific obsession with dairy production. Thessaly welcomes you not with a fanfare, but with a fly landing on your lip. You try to be gracious. Grace is sort of your thing. As you arrive at the outer fields of King Admetus' estate, the world feels heavy. Not in the end of days sense, more like the weight of wool cloaks, rain-warped cartwheels, and that earthy human scent of warm hay mixed with onions. King Admetus himself is surprisingly casual. No throne room theatrics, no dramatic challenges or riddles. Just a youngish man with wild eyebrows, a calm demeanor, and a tunic that looks like it's been repaired with bread dough. He greets you like you're a lost cousin who stumbled into the wrong festival. Strong arms? He asks. You nod. Cow-friendly? You blink. He tosses you a crust of barley bread, points to a field, and that's it. You're hired. The formality of divine punishment, distilled into one bite of dry bread and a shrug. Admetus is no fool, though. He may not know your name, but something in his stare lingers a little too long. Mortals are good at pretending they believe you're just a normal guy with suspiciously perfect hair and unsettling eye contact. But he doesn't push, yet. The estate is functional, not royal. A couple of stone huts, olive trees trained into neat rows, and the distant bellowing of cows who've clearly unionized against the concept of fences. You're given a room. Well, more of a nook. A hollow space beside the stable where the hay is only 40% mold. Your roommate is a sheepdog named Keros, who sleeps exactly where you intended to put your lyre. That's fine. You weren't planning to serenade livestock anyway. Probably. Your first night as a mortal is oddly quiet. The stars above don't shimmer with divine approval or portents. They just twinkle, cold and uncaring. No constellations rearrange themselves to spell, hang in there. You wrap yourself in a wool blanket that smells faintly of goat sadness and let sleep, real and uneventful, find you. Historians still argue whether this myth is allegorical or based on older seasonal rituals. Was Apollo's servitude symbolic of winter's waning power? Or simply a good moral tale to explain why even gods can be humbled? Whatever the scholars say, you're here now. And tomorrow, you meet the cows. You wake up to a snout in your face. Not metaphorically. A literal cow nose, wet and insistent, huffing into your hair like you're a bouquet of fresh grass. Keros, the sheepdog, is nowhere to be found. Probably off chasing philosophical geese or contemplating ditch water. You, on the other hand, are trying to remember the part of your immortal resume that prepared you for bovine wake-up calls. The cow snorts again. It's not impressed. You groan, roll over, and realize this particular beast is standing inside your doorway. Apparently doors are optional in Thessaly, or maybe the cow is just exceptionally persuasive. You try to remember what you once said in Delphi about the cycles of nature and the sacred bovine spirit. It was probably poetic. You were probably wearing something embroidered. You're now covered in straw, your tunic smells faintly of cheese, and your left sandal has vanished. Welcome to your divine internship. Breakfast is brown. Some sort of grain mush with what may be fig pieces or maybe pebbles. Hard to say. Admetus greets you without ceremony. He's already wearing his work cloak and holding a rake. Sun's late, he says pointedly, eyeing you like you personally scheduled the sunrise. You manage a polite nod, resisting the urge to snap your fingers and make the sky explode in light. No divine cheats. You promised. Today, your official duties begin. There are 32 cows. You know this because Admetus hands you a carved stick with notches, each representing one of the herd. Don't lose any, he says, especially not the one with the white forehead patch. She bites. You meet her shortly. Her name, for reasons no one explains, is Calliope. She stares at you like she's reading your astral chart and finding it unflattering. You make a mental note not to walk in front of her, or behind her, or possibly within 5 feet. The other cows are less judgmental but just as opinionated. There's a brown one that moves with the rhythm of a drinking song. A surprisingly fast one that sprints whenever a butterfly appears. And at least 3 that seem to enjoy standing in your way, no matter which direction you're headed. You lead them out to pasture, herding stick in hand, trying to look competent. This fails almost immediately. The cows have memorized every loophole in the fencing and execute an escape plan that feels choreographed. By mid-morning, your robe is muddy, your sandals are damp, and your pride is bruised. You trip over a root while trying to stop the sprinter cow, her name is Frixa, and land in something unmentionable. A nearby shepherd boy snickers. You consider vaporizing him. Just a small bolt, nothing permanent. But no, you're here to learn humility, or punishment, or patience. The exact goal depends on which mythic version you follow. Historians still argue whether this tale was meant to show Apollo's humanizing side, or whether it was a later addition. Some say it came from Boeotian oral traditions. Others suggest Thessalian cult rituals. The versions vary. But the detail about herding cows for a full year sticks in every retelling. And honestly, it shows. By midday, you've managed to corral the majority of the cows into a gentle shaded glen. The grass is thick, and there's a spring bubbling nearby. You sit on a rock, trying to regain dignity. A butterfly lands on your toe. A cow sneezes on your shoulder. You pluck a reed and attempt to make music. It sounds like a dying duck. You try again. The second attempt is less horrible. A passing crow tilts its head at you, unimpressed but curious. You hum a melody under your breath, low and meandering. Something in Dorian mode, maybe. It winds around the breeze, and you imagine it wrapping the cows in a soft sort of leash. And strangely, they stay close. Calliope stares at you like she knows you cheated. The afternoon is slow. The cows eat. You hum. A few villagers pass by, tossing polite greetings. One old woman offers you a fig wrapped in a leaf. It's surprisingly good, though slightly fermented. You eat it anyway. As the sun dips lower, painting the fields gold, you lead the herd back to the estate. You only lose one for a few minutes. Turns out she wandered off to sniff a beehive. You name her Melia. She doesn't seem to mind. Admetus meets you at the fence. He glances at the cows, counts them silently, then gives you a slight nod. "You'll do," he mutters, and walks away, tossing you a chunk of cheese like a passing compliment. The cheese is excellent. That night, lying on your straw mattress, you feel oddly tired. Not God-tired. Not post-battle, post-oracle, post-plague delivery tired. Just human tired. The kind that curls into your bones and makes your body feel heavy and real. Kairos returns, flopping beside you with a satisfied grunt. His fur is damp. You don't ask why. You look up at the night sky and catch yourself reaching for the stars, literally. Your hand pauses midair. No divine touch tonight. Just soft starlight, a tired cowherd, and a sheepdog that smells like pond. Sleep creeps in slowly, like fog over a hillside. Tomorrow, you try counting them before they eat the fence. The rooster crows, loudly, in your face. You make a mental note to write a strongly worded epic about this rooster one day. Perhaps call it The Odious Beak. But for now, you are once again mortal, very much awake and, judging by the scratchy sensation across your jaw, apparently growing a beard. This might not sound alarming, but for someone who's been aesthetically perfect for millennia, it's a bit much. You sit up in your hay pile, brush off a few twigs, and nod at Kairos, who's gnawing on something mysterious and hoof-shaped, hopefully not a fellow employee. Today's challenge: meet your boss properly. Not, "Here's a rake, go count cows," but an actual conversation. The man you serve, King Admetus, deserves more than side eyes and polite nods, especially now that you're going to be around for, well, 362 more days. You find him in the olive grove, wrestling with a stubborn root like it owes him money. He looks up, sweat gleaming on his forehead, and gestures toward a jug of water. You sit nearby, offering a cautious "good morning," and he replies without looking. "Hope the white patch cow didn't bite you. She bit the tax collector last week. Didn't hate it." You laugh, genuinely, and for a moment, Apollo, golden god of song and reason, shares a very mortal chuckle with a man wearing a tunic stained with prune juice and philosophical regret. King Admetus, it turns out, is not your average ruler. Sure, he holds court, pays taxes to whoever is pretending to be Thessaly's overlord this season, and hosts dignitaries when they show up without warning. But most of his life is here, in the fields, in the vines, under the sun. He likes order, clean tools, and clear skies. He dislikes feasts, public speeches, and, this part is whispered, as if it could summon trouble, prophecies. You resist the urge to say, same. Over the course of the day, Admetus shows you around the rest of the estate. There's a modest wine press with extremely unmodest pigeons perched on it. A dovecote filled with birds that looks smarter than half the local council. And an apiary that you're told only stings guests. You pass through the kitchen garden, where an elderly cook named Timandra is growing what might be leeks or might be onions. It's a running argument among the staff. She eyes you suspiciously until you compliment her herb rose. Then she softens and offers you a sticky date. Timandra will one day threaten to hex a visiting warlord using only lentils and sarcasm. But that's a tale for later. Midday arrives, and you and the king take lunch under a fig tree. The figs are warm from the sun, split with sweetness, and served on stale bread that crumbles exactly where you don't want it to. Conversation drifts to music. You casually mention that you used to play a bit. Admetus raises an eyebrow. A bit? You smile, reach for your travel bag, and pull out your lyre. It's wrapped in old linen, hidden since your arrival. You didn't want to out yourself too early. Not that a musical performance screams divine exile, but still. You tune it carefully, the strings responding with eager little sighs. You play something slow, something soft, not one of your temple anthems, too grand, but a shepherd's lullaby you once overheard on Crete. The notes rise like lazy bees drifting over the grass. Admetus goes very still. He doesn't applaud. He doesn't even speak at first. Just closes his eyes and lets the music settle into his bones. When it ends, he breathes in deep and says, "You're either a very lucky man or something else entirely." You laugh it off. Maybe just lucky. He doesn't press. But something shifts. Historians still argue whether King Admetus knew the truth about Apollo from the beginning. Some versions paint him as a clever mortal who chose not to speak the obvious. Others suggest he was simply kind enough not to ask why his new cowherd glowed a bit too brightly at dusk. Later that afternoon, you return to the cows. They seem slightly more respectful. Or maybe it's the lingering smell of figs on your fingers. Either way, Calliope doesn't butt you today. Progress. You find yourself humming as you guide them through the pasture. They follow more easily now, especially when you vary the melody. Music, it seems, might actually make cows behave. You make a mental note to test this further, with chords, maybe even rhythms. The divine science of bovine psychology. In the distance, a pair of village children watch you, whispering behind a bush. One of them is holding a stick like a miniature lyre. You pretend not to notice. Evening falls. The sun, your old co-worker, dips gently behind the hills. You lead the herd back to the estate, counting every single one with the notch stick. 32. Still intact, including the fast one, the biter, and the cow who insists on licking your elbow. Admetus is waiting with a bowl of soup. It's mostly lentils and mystery roots. You accept it gratefully. As stars reappear overhead and the air cools with a promise of dew, you realize something unexpected. You're settling in. The cows, the music, the king, even the stubborn rooster. There's a rhythm forming. a mortal rhythm. And somehow, it doesn't feel like a punishment anymore. Just don't tell Zeus that. Dawn comes with less drama this time. No rooster ambush, no snout in your face. Just the soft crunch of straw beneath your elbow and the gentle warmth of Keros nestled against your side like a hairy sack of onions. You stretch, yawn, how mortal of you, and inhale the scent of dew, hay, and something faintly burnt. Probably Timandra testing new bread improvements. Outside, the estate hums with morning activity. Bees drone lazily in the herb garden. A cart creaks somewhere near the olives. The cows are awake before you, and some of them are already attempting to escape the field enclosure by sheer willpower. You'll get to that in a minute. But first, music. You sit beneath a squat fig tree, Lyre on your lap, fingers trailing lightly over the strings. You play for no one in particular. A slow, meandering melody that tastes of dust and sun and olive pits. It's imperfect, even a little creaky in parts. But there's charm in that, something real, something grounding. You don't notice Admetus approach until he clears his throat. He's holding 2 small cups of something steaming. Barley tea, he says, or something pretending to be barley tea. Timandra says it improves digestion and vision, but it might just be hot leaf juice. You take it, sip. It's vaguely comforting, like drinking the idea of warmth more than warmth itself. The king sits beside you, not speaking at first, just sharing silence the way people who've been tired together often do. Then, without preamble, he says, I once tried to learn the lyre. When I was 12, my tutor said I had the hands of a butcher and the ears of a sack of beans. You choke politely on your tea. Did you stop? You ask. I improved, he says, deadpan. Now I can play a full scale before someone cries. You laugh, and it echoes gently through the early air. It feels easy. It feels good. Later, as you head to the meadow, herding stick in hand, you notice something new. A small stone shrine at the edge of the path. Nothing elaborate, just 3 stacked rocks, a sprig of rosemary, and what appears to be a very lumpy clay cow figurine. You pause. It's clearly recent. No inscriptions. But a small symbol, 2 sun rays scratched into the top stone, catches your eye. You glance around. No one watching. A mortal offering. To you. Well, not you. Just the humble, mysterious cowherd who sings the cows to sleep and glows faintly in the moonlight. You don't touch it. Just bow your head slightly and move on. If the villagers are starting to wonder, they're keeping their thoughts private. For now. By midday, you and the cows have settled into something resembling cooperation. Frixa, the sprinter cow, still takes off at random, but at least she circles back now. Calliope has decided you're tolerable and permits the occasional head pat. The brown cow with the drinking song moo has added a new verse, which you suspect is about your walking speed. The real breakthrough comes during lunch. You're sitting on a flat rock, chewing on a suspiciously chewy olive, when you hear a rustle in the bushes. You freeze, expecting perhaps a snake or another child with a poorly drawn halo portrait of you. Instead, it's Admetus, holding a flute. He sits down like this is completely normal. No eye contact, no explanation. Just starts playing. It's not good. The notes are thin and wobbly, like a bird arguing with a leak. But there's effort, honest effort, the kind that deserves an audience. You nod along, tapping a slow beat on your knee. Eventually, you hum a quiet harmony. The flute wavers, then steadies, and for about 30 seconds, you and this mortal man, this king with dirt under his nails and music in his ribs, make something resembling beauty. Historians still argue whether Admetus and Apollo formed a genuine friendship or whether the myth was shaped by later authors seeking to humanize the gods. But sitting here in the grass, sharing music and shade, it doesn't really matter. You're in it. You're present. The moment ends with a cow sneezing directly onto Admetus's tunic. He wipes it off with philosophical calm and says, "Well, that's a blessing, I think." You spend the rest of the day fixing a fence the cows have voted unanimously to destroy. It's tedious work. Measuring wood, hammering stakes, tying knots that immediately unknot themselves out of spite. Keros supervises by digging an impressive hole nearby. You hum as you work. Not magical music, not temple music, just a little tune about cows and mud and how sandals were clearly invented as a joke. A passing shepherd asks if you'll play at the midsummer gathering. You pretend to misunderstand and mention you're very busy with hooves. That night, there's a small dinner gathering under the olive tree. Admetus has invited a few local farmers, a visiting cousin, and, awkwardly, a woman who keeps trying to make eye contact with you. She's holding a lyre and wearing sandals with too many straps. She also keeps giggling. You nod politely and find an excuse to help Tamandra stir stew. Turns out it's not stew. It's fermented lentils. You don't ask questions. The night ends with someone attempting to juggle walnuts and failing magnificently. The woman with the lyre suggests a duet. You suggest she talk to Calliope instead. You retire to your nook, full of strange food and strange feelings. Being mortal is exhausting, but not bad. As you fall asleep, you hear Admetus practicing scales on his flute. He's almost in tune. The next morning, you are awoken not by cows or roosters, but by singing. Loud, enthusiastic, and only mostly in tune. It takes you a moment to register the source. Admetus, singing. Through the open window of his modest royal quarters, his voice carries over the olive trees like an ox balancing on a tightrope. It's a Thessalian folk song, something about goats, wine, and unrequited love, involving a baker's apprentice and a broken wheel of cheese. You stare at the ceiling and silently wonder what divine sin you committed in a previous life to deserve this musical alarm. Still, it's charming, in a chaotic sort of way. Keros stretches beside you with the soft grunt of a dog who has decided none of this is his problem. Outside, the sky glows pale gold, the first warmth of the sun creeping across the stone walls. And, thankfully, the cows have not rioted yet. You get up, shake the straw from your cloak, and step out into another morning as Thessaly's most reluctant farmhand. Admetus is already waiting by the pasture fence, flute slung over his shoulder like he's auditioning for a woodwind militia. "Thought we could do morning rounds with music," he says brightly. "Might improve morale." You glance at the cows. They stare back, unimpressed. Still, you humor him. You hum a soft counter-melody while Admetus attempts a jaunty tune. It's hard to tell if the cows appreciate the concert or are simply too confused to run. Either way, they follow, mostly in formation, into the eastern field where the grass is dewy and thick. The day stretches gently, like a cat in the sun. Mid-morning, a traveler arrives. A thin, dusty man with a mule that appears more fashionable than its owner. The stranger carries scrolls, beads, and one truly ridiculous hat. He introduces himself as Diodoros, poet, philosopher, and trader of rare squash seeds. You're not sure what to do with that information. Admetus invites him to lunch. Bring your seeds, he says, and maybe your opinions. So lunch is held under the fig tree again, with Diodoros sharing stories between loud bites of boiled egg. He claims to have visited the oracle at Dodona and been told he'd one day invent a new kind of alphabet made entirely of whistling. But, he adds gravely, the wind keeps stealing my drafts. You nod solemnly. Admetus tries not to laugh. Charos steals one of the eggs. Over lentils and cheese, the conversation turns, as it often does with wandering poets, to the gods. Diodoros speaks of Apollo in hushed, reverent tones. Bringer of plague and poetry, he says. Beautiful but terrifying. They say his eyes can make an olive tree bloom or burst into flame. You sip your barley tea carefully and raise one eyebrow. Just one. Smooth. Some say he once served a mortal king, Diodoros adds, gesturing toward the hills. Right here, in Thessaly, herding cows like a common man. Can you imagine? Admetus does not look at you. You do not look at Admetus. You both chew in silence. Ridiculous, the poet laughs. What kind of god would work, especially for a man? You smile softly, a little too widely. Historians still argue whether tales like this were intended to humble the gods or glorify the mortals who hosted them. Was the story of Apollo's punishment a rare moment of divine vulnerability, or simply a cautionary tale with very good cows? Diodoros departs by sundown, whistling something vaguely alphabetical. His mule leaves behind a deeply offended rooster feather. That evening, Admetus joins you on your walk through the pastures. The cows are slow, lazy from the heat, and content to follow your tuneless humming. The king walks beside you quietly. I don't believe he meant any insult, he says after a long silence. None taken, you reply, though your voice betrays a hint of something deeper. Wry amusement, perhaps, or mild god-level existentialism. He glances sideways. You ever get tired of people talking about you like a riddle? You think for a moment. Only when they get the answer wrong. That night, you return to your nook and find a small gift left by the stable door. A reed whistle carved clumsily with a single note that sounds almost like a moo. There's no note, but you have a very good guess. You lie in the hay, staring up at the wooden beams above, and let your body melt into mortal fatigue. Your hands are calloused, your feet ache. And still, there's a kind of quiet satisfaction curled in your chest like a sleeping cat. As you drift off, you hear someone outside practicing scales on a lyre. They're off key, but they're trying. The day begins with a minor stampede. Not a dramatic cloud of dust, hooves of doom stampede. Just a mildly chaotic shuffle involving 3 cows, 2 buckets, and 1 extremely distressed goose. You had stepped away for exactly 6 minutes to relieve yourself under an olive tree, humming a lullaby about figs, when all 32 cows decided, collectively, that today was the day the field gate would be optional. It wasn't even broken. It was just slightly ajar. And that's all they needed. By the time you return, Phryxa, the sprinter cow, is leading a slow-motion escape across the herb garden. Calliope is chewing on what appears to be a scarf from the laundry line, and the youngest of the herd, a curly-eared darling named Thelxipea, is calmly sitting in the village well, looking very pleased with herself. You spend the next hour chasing cows through various semi-dignified settings. A vineyard, a weaving shed, the inner courtyard of a confused pottery class. Villagers watch in bemusement. One boy offers to help if he can keep whichever cow he catches. You politely decline. Eventually, with the aid of Keros and a strategically waved cheesecloth, you herd them back to the pasture. You deliver a stern lecture, which they mostly ignore. Calliope licks your forehead halfway through. Admetus appears at the fence, sipping something greenish from a cracked cup. "Rough morning?" he asks, looking far too pleased. "Cows don't respond well to philosophy," you mutter, brushing fig pulp from your sleeve. "Try Lyre music," he says. "Worked on me." He disappears before you can throw the cheesecloth at him. Despite the chaos, you manage to get the herd grazing peacefully by mid-morning. You settle onto your favorite rock, flattish, sun-warmed, just the right height for melancholy thinking, and pluck absent-mindedly at your lyre. The tune is slow, repetitive, something halfway between a lullaby and a funeral march for dignity. And yet, the cows respond. They chew more slowly. They drift less. Even Freaksa, who normally tries to moon jump over fence rails, lies down with a long sigh, her legs folded like pastry dough. A shepherd passes by and comments that you must have learned the ancient cow tamer's tune. You nod like that's a real thing and make a mental note to invent a myth around it later. That afternoon, a surprise guest arrives. A priest from a nearby village, robed in blue with a beard so well oiled it reflects the sun. He's here to collect a seasonal offering and clearly to snoop. He eyes you curiously. "You're the one who sings the cows into obedience?" "I prefer guides through harmonic suggestion," you reply, tilting your head. He hums thoughtfully. "There are whispers. Some think you're blessed." That word again. Not divine, not magical. Blessed. You smile. "That's between me and the cows." Historians still argue whether rural priesthoods helped spread stories of Apollo's earthly time, seeing it as a chance to insert their own temples into a divine narrative. Whether through flattery or genuine belief, these visits, like today's, were seeds, tiny rumors with very long roots. As the priest accepts his customary basket of cheese and barley, he offers a cryptic blessing of his own. "May the sun know your shadow and find it familiar." You decide to keep that one. Later, you're in the grove, trimming branches that the cows have nibbled into bizarre shapes, when you hear a soft humming. A child's voice. You turn slowly. It's a small girl with pigtails and a tunic 3 sizes too big, holding a stick like a scepter and balancing a round, flat stone on her head. "I'm the sun god," she announces proudly. "Oh," you say, suppressing a smile. "Yes, I make the cows moo and the figs grow." You kneel down. "That's a lot of responsibility." She nods solemnly. "Also, I like yellow." A future cult leader, clearly. She marches off with great purpose, trailed by a chicken in the breeze. You watch her go and wonder how many of your myths started just like that, with a stick, a rock, and a very serious child. Evening arrives with a pale violet sky and the sound of flutes drifting from the village square. Admetus has gone to a council meeting, leaving you to close up the pasture solo. You hum your favorite slow tune, something ancient, older than the temples, older than Olympus itself. A melody passed down from shepherds who had no words for gods, only stars and sleep. The cows settle easily. You count them by habit now, not need. 32. all accounted for. Even Thelxipaya, who keeps trying to sneak into the olive press. You linger a while under the sky. The stars blink lazily. No messages or warnings tonight. Just cool, quiet pinpricks in the vast ceiling of the world. You lie back on the grass, arms behind your head, and feel the soft weight of the earth pressing upward. Mortal gravity. It pulls at more than your bones. Tomorrow will bring more cows, more questions, more awkward conversations with people who think they've seen your face carved in marble. But for now, the cows are quiet. The lyre is warm, and you're just a man in a field. A little glowing, perhaps, but otherwise, ordinary. You wake up to the sound of gossip. Not whispers, not murmurs, gossip. Loud, unfiltered, and delivered in the sing-song cadence unique to middle-aged women standing near a water source. You're still tangled in your blanket when you hear it float through the window like a particularly determined bird. I'm telling you, he doesn't even sweat. I saw him hauling that fence post last week and not a drop. Just glowing. Another voice chimes in, just slightly nasal. And my cousin says her cousin saw him talking to a rock. A rock! A third, breathless. And the cows? They follow him like he's got ambrosia tucked in his sandals. You groan into your pillow. Fame, it seems, is like goat cheese. Best when aged slowly and kept far, far away from laundry day. Outside, the morning unfolds as usual. Bees humming in the thyme bushes, Keros chasing something invisible, and Calliope practicing her slow-motion intimidation walk toward a barrel. Standard cow chaos. You gather your things, check your lyre for spider intrusions, and head out. But the whispers follow you. At the well, near the olive press, even by the apiary, where bees usually drown out most mortal nonsense. It's not just idle talk now. It's a movement. Someone has painted a sunburst on a clay jar and left it beside the fence. A child gives you a drawing. It's you, sort of. There's a halo, an oversized lyre, and what appears to be laser beams shooting from your eyes. You try to keep a straight face. Admetus notices too. Over barley soup, he watches you carefully. The villagers are getting curious, he says, swirling his spoon. They're starting to think you're someone. You raise a brow. Aren't we all someone? He doesn't smile. You're not just someone. I've seen you sing the cows to sleep. I've seen them follow your shadow. I've seen you step barefoot on thistles and not even blink. You sigh. Maybe I just have excellent feet. No one has excellent feet, he mutters. Not in Thessaly. He leans forward, lowers his voice. I don't need to know the truth. I only need to know if they're in danger. You look at him, really look, and see the weight behind the question. This man, for all his muddy tunics and off-key flute habits, is a king. He protects people, even from gods, if he has to. You meet his gaze. They're not in danger? Not from me. He nods. Then let them gossip. It gives the market something to talk about besides pig prices. Still, the rumors bloom. By midweek, someone has left an offering at the base of your favorite fig tree. A ring of daisies, a small, cracked cup of honey, and a fig carved with your initials, or someone's initials. Mortals are imprecise with letter forms. A cow eats it before you can decide whether to be honored. Later that afternoon, a group of children begins following you. Not closely, just at a distance, like slightly shy ducklings. Every time you turn, they scatter, giggling. One of them throws a tiny, lopsided lyre made of sticks onto the path ahead of you, then runs away screaming. You pick it up. It's actually not bad. You leave it on the shrine rock, next to the sunburst jar. Historians still argue whether local hero cults around Apollo emerged independently or were woven into the myth much later by poets wanting to localize the divine. Either way, the signs were often the same. Small shrines, child followers, spontaneous offerings, and livestock behaving suspiciously well. You check on the cows. Suspiciously well indeed. They are calm, grazing, forming aesthetically pleasing groups without being asked. Frixa no longer tries to leap over fences. She now waits for you to open the gate and bows her head politely as she passes. You're not sure if you're training them or they're just mimicking your vibe. That evening, Admetus calls for a quiet meeting. No torches, no guards. Just you, him, and a small table with 2 cups of wine and a bowl of pickled figs. He offers you one. They're better than they sound. You try one. They are not. He studies the stars for a moment before speaking. I've decided not to ask. You blink. About the figs? No. About you. I could demand answers. I could call in a priest or a seer. But I think I know enough. You wait. You're not here forever. That much is clear. And when you go, I want you to know, you made this place better. It's the kindest thing anyone said to you in centuries. You clink cups, and for the first time, you feel less like a fugitive god and more like, dare you say it, a neighbor. That night, you sit by the pasture fence, watching the stars with Keros snoring beside you. One of the cows, probably Thelxipea, rests her heavy head on your shoulder. You don't move. It's quiet, warm, and somehow, despite the rumors, the drawings, and the overly optimistic offerings, you feel human, just enough. Tomorrow, you'll teach Calliope not to steal laundry, or try to, one miracle at a time. You are not trying to perform miracles. Truly, you're not. But when you sneeze so hard that it cures a man's gout of chronic hiccups, it's hard to keep a low profile. It starts innocently enough, just a normal, mildly pollen-filled day. You're walking back from the upper pasture with a basket of oddly shaped turnips when a gust of wind delivers a noseful of thyme straight into your sinuses. You let out a thunderous sneeze, divine in both volume and intensity. And somewhere down the hill, a goat lets out a tiny burp, then falls silent for the first time in 3 days. Its owner, a man named Cleon, bursts into tears. Thank you. It was keeping the baby awake. You tried to say bless you, but the moment has already spiraled. He kneels. He presses your hand to his forehead. He gives you a turnip. It's warm. You're not sure why. By the time you return to the estate, the story has grown 3 sizes, depending on which version you overhear. You summoned a healing wind with your nose. You whispered in goat language to realign its soul. You exorcised a minor forest demon that had taken residence in the goat's esophagus. Timandra is now leaving a sprig of mint in your soup, just in case. You thank her. Keros sniffs your hair, clearly suspicious. And Admetus? He leans on the doorframe that evening and says, So, how often do you sneeze livestock back to health? You groan. Once, and never again, if I can help it. He chuckles. You know, there's a word for this. What? Reputation. You throw a turnip at him. He catches it and bites in like an apple. The next few days roll by with unusual ease. The cows have settled into a comforting routine. Graze, nap, follow your musical cues like large, sentient loaves of bread. Even Calliope now responds to your voice with a kind of grudging respect. You're not friends exactly, but you're no longer mortal enemies. One afternoon, as you're cleaning the water trough, a group of local elders stop by for a walk that just so happens to end at the fence near your favorite tree. They don't speak to you directly. They just linger. One starts loudly recounting a story about a cowherd who once healed a boy's broken toe with a lullaby. Another hums something that sounds very much like your cow guiding melody. You sigh, pat the cow nearest you, and say, "If one of them starts carving my face on a stone, moo as loud as you can." She winks. You're 80% sure it's deliberate. Later, you find that someone has placed a small loaf of bread shaped vaguely like a lyre on the shrine rock. You appreciate the gesture. The execution, however, is questionable. You feed it to Kairos, who regrets it immediately, but refuses to admit defeat. That night, the stars are particularly bright. You lie on your back in the pasture, the grass cool against your arms, Kairos's tail thumping gently beside you. In the distance, you hear the faint echo of someone singing. It's a lullaby. Yours. A mortal voice, off-key, earnest, soft. You smile. Historians still argue whether Apollo's accidental miracles during his year of servitude were genuine or just poetic metaphors for the civilizing influence of art and music. One school of thought insists the tales were exaggerated by local bards, hoping to attract worshippers. Another claims these episodes were humble displays of divine presence, intentional, quiet, and deeply human. You think it's probably both. The next morning, Admetus tells you about a village further east that's suffering from a bad cough. Goats, humans, everyone wheezing like broken flutes. He offers to send medicine, but then pauses. Or, I could just send you, Sneezy. You glare at him. Don't start. But the request is real. You make the journey with a cart, 2 goats, and a basket of herbs. The villagers welcome you with nervous smiles and cautious stares. The local priest immediately sprinkles wine on your feet. "I'm not barefoot," you say. He shrugs. It soaks in. You spend the day teaching them how to boil thyme and honey into a proper tonic, showing a boy how to hold a lyre correctly, and yes, sneezing once or twice. Genuinely, thank you very much. Whether it's the herbs, the music, or the placebo of your glowing presence, the coughing eases by sundown. They send you home with 3 wheels of cheese, a cloak embroidered with your initials, and a song that involves your name rhyming with swallow and hollow. Back at the estate, Admetus listens to the song, then asks, "Do they know your name's not actually Thalos?" "No," you say, and we're not correcting them. That night, as you sit by the fire, your fingers absently plucking chords on the lyre, you feel something shift. It's not a miracle, not a celestial sign, just a small warmth, quiet, steady, human. You have a reputation now. You're a mystery. You're a helper. You're the cowherd who sings, sneezes, and glows a little in the dark. And maybe, just maybe, you're okay with that. You spend the next several mornings trying to count cows without being mocked by them. It's harder than it sounds. You wake early, take your herding stick, and greet the herd with a polite nod, as if you're leading a very disorganized musical ensemble. The cows blink at you, unimpressed. Calliope chews loudly. Phryxa, the sprinter, starts stretching, which you take as a warning. You've developed a system. Line them up at the pasture gate, count each one as they pass, and try to keep a mental tally using your notched stick. It's basic math. Divine beings have done harder things. You've calculated planetary movements, mapped harmonics of the spheres, and even once rewrote the ending of an oracle riddle because it was too predictable. But 32 cows? 32 moving cows? With unpredictable bathroom habits, dramatic personalities, and a collective attention span of a fig? Impossible. Today, your count goes like this. 1, 2, 3, wait. Did that one already go by? 4, 5, 6. Hold on. That's the same cow again. You're sure of it. You mark a notch anyway. 7, 8. Cow with a limp. 9. Cow with what might be a pigeon on her back. 10. No. Pigeon flew off. 11. 2 more. 13. Was that 2? Or 1 cow twice? You start over. Admetus, lounging on a nearby olive crate, watches with open amusement. You know, he calls, you could just brand them. You look at him as if he suggested sacrificing a lyre. He shrugs. Just a thought. Branding sacred cattle? You'd rather wrestle a minotaur in a maze full of philosophy students. Historians still debate whether Apollo's time as a herdsman included the introduction of more structured cattle tracking systems in certain regions of Thessaly. There's even an obscure farming tablet referencing divine tallies, though scholars disagree whether that's metaphorical or literal. You decide your method is better, personal, musical even, so you try something new. You name them all. Not random names, descriptive, memorable, ideally melodic. Calliope, of course, remains Calliope. Phryxa stays Phryxa. But the others? You begin to assign them epithets based on behavior. Melas, the one who refuses to move unless sung to in Dorian mode. Glyke follows you like a dog and once licked Admetus' sandal clean. Strabo squints at everything and may, in fact, be farsighted. Potamos bathes in mud. Constantly, even when there is no mud. With each name, the cow seems to react. Not quite like a dog. More like a roommate who's been waiting for proper recognition. You hum a melody for each. A short phrase, 3 notes, 4 maybe. It's not divine magic, at least not consciously. But the rhythm helps. The count becomes less of a task and more of a morning ritual. You whistle a tune, and 12 cows line up. You pluck your lyre, and Melas sways. The cows are getting smarter, or maybe you're just getting worse at pretending this is a punishment. Later that day, you find one of the younger village boys copying your system. He's standing on a rock near his family's goat pen, calling his goats by name with a little panpipe looped around his neck. The goats do not cooperate, but the boy is persistent. You nod in approval. Admetus joins you in the field after lunch, bringing a carved board with little wooden cow tokens. Thought you might want to try visualizing it, he says. Are you building me a cow abacus? He grins. Call it divine logistics. The two of you spend an hour moving tokens across the board, debating whether Thelxipaya counts as 1 cow or 2, given her habit of disappearing and reappearing with mysterious twigs in her fur. Keros supervises, occasionally nudging the tokens with his nose, possibly contributing, possibly sabotaging. As the sun sets, painting the fields in lazy golden strokes, you do one final count. This time, you sing the full list softly as you walk the pasture. Calliope, Phryxa, Melas, Glyke. Each cow responds. A nudge, a blink, a slow chew of acknowledgement. All 32. You don't need the stick. You don't need the board. You just know. That night, as you sit under the fig tree playing soft chords, a villager passes by and pauses. "You always sing when you count?" they ask. "It helps me remember who's who," you reply. The villager nods. "My grandmother used to do that with olive trees." You smile. "Smart grandmother." He tilts his head. She also claimed a turtle spoke to her in her sleep. Still smart. When he leaves, you return to your melody. It's soft, slow, filled with a low lull of contentment. Above you, the stars blink in time, not in a magical way, just in their usual ancient rhythm. Counting cows by music. Who would have thought? Probably not Zeus. You lean back in the grass, your hand trailing lazy circles over the lyre strings, and let the world drift gently into quiet. Tomorrow, you'll teach Admetus to identify Podemos before he jumps in the laundry trough again. Progress comes in moose-shaped steps. You try mortal flirting today. It doesn't go well. It begins innocently enough. You're walking back from the village market, basket in hand, filled with olives, barley, and something Timandra insisted was a medicinal root, but which very much looks like a withered carrot. It's market day, which means everyone is slightly sunburned, slightly suspicious of each other's onions, and very talkative. That's when you see her. A nymph, or possibly a mortal, or more accurately, a nymph pretending to be a mortal, pretending to be a nymph. She's selling flower garlands, arranging them on a wooden stand with far too much aesthetic care. There are petals in her hair. One eye is outlined in something sparkly. She looks like she's read The Art of Luring Gods at least twice. She smiles at you. You smile back. Then you panic. "Do you like cows?" you ask. She pauses. "What?" You double down. "I heard them." Gently, with music. The conversation devolves quickly from there. You attempt a casual lean on a basket of lentils. It collapses. A nearby donkey sneezes in solidarity. She nods politely, hands you a garland shaped vaguely like a turnip, and turns her attention to a fisherman. Back at the estate, Admetus sees the garland around your neck and raises an eyebrow. You get proposed to? You sigh. "I think I got rejected politely." He pats your shoulder. "That's better than most mortals get." You retreat to the pastures for some emotional regrouping and melodic dignity repair. The cows, mercifully, do not judge. Calliope blinks slowly. Phryxa nudges your shoulder. Thelxipea tries to eat the garland. You sit in the grass and begin playing a slow tune, a soft, wistful melody that winds around the breeze like a ribbon. You don't often play sad songs, but this one's more thoughtful than melancholy. Music for missed chances and awkward compliments. A shepherd walking by stops to listen. "That's lovely," he says. "What's it called?" You shrug. "Probably Flower Girl and the Lentil Basket of Shame." He nods. Catchy. Later that evening, Admetus finds you near the fig tree. He's carrying 2 cups and a look that says, "I'm not going to say I told you so, but I absolutely told you so." He hands you one of the cups. Mead, for wounded pride. You sip. It's sweeter than expected. He sits beside you, watching the cows meander back toward the stable. "You know," he says casually, "not every story has to end in a wedding." You raise an eyebrow, says the man who had 5 suitors show up last month with goats and very aggressive poetry. One offered to tattoo my face on his horse. Romantic. He chuckles, then falls quiet. the kind of silence that isn't heavy, just thoughtful. You ever miss it? He asks after a while. Whatever life you had before. You don't answer right away. You watch the sun dip lower, turning the grass gold. Yes, you finally say. And no. He nods, not pushing. Historians still argue whether Apollo's flirtation with mortals during his year of exile was part of the official myth or later poetic embellishment. Some versions include full-blown love affairs, others mere passing glances. But none of them tell the truth about how deeply lonely even a god can feel when no one knows who he really is. You rise and walk toward the cows, cup still in hand. You hum a little tune. Not sad this time, something light, something that makes Melas sway his head like he's hearing music for the first time. Behind you, Admetus begins to whistle. Off-key, of course. But the tune's familiar. It's yours. That night, you lie in your nook, staring at the stars through a gap in the roof. Keros snores beside you. The cows have settled in for the night, and your lyre rests against the wall, silent but warm with memory. You think of the flower girl, of her crooked smile, of how impossible it is to flirt while being divine and covered in lentil dust. But you also think of the garland, still mostly intact, resting now beside your bedroll, and that maybe, in some small way, she did see something in you, even if it was just someone who hums to cows. Sleep takes you like a slow tide. No dreams tonight. Just the lingering hum of your own melody, winding quietly into the stars. The day begins with a gift. You find it at the pasture gate, tucked between two fence posts, wrapped in a faded linen cloth and tied with a strip of blue ribbon. It's not elaborate, just a bundle of pressed wildflowers and a delicate wooden charm shaped like a sunburst. There's no note, no name, just a single olive tucked into the cloth, which you take as either a token of goodwill or someone's snack donation to your mysterious divine identity. You glance around the fields. The cows are pretending not to look, but Glyke is standing suspiciously close to the bundle, chewing slowly and blinking like she's holding a secret. You pick it up and smile, not because it's from anyone in particular, though you suspect Flower Girl might be behind this, but because it marks something new. A shift in how the villagers see you. Less a curiosity, more a presence. A gentle mystery that sings to cows and fixes fences and helps Timandra identify suspicious root vegetables. You tuck the charm into your belt and go about your morning chores, humming as you go. Today is bright, crisp, the kind of morning that makes you think someone cleaned the sky overnight. Admetus joins you by mid-morning, looking unusually cheerful and holding a large bundle wrapped in cloth. Special delivery, he says. A gift for you. You eye it warily. If this is another tunic from the village weaving guild, tell them I only have one torso. He grins and pulls away the cloth. It's a lyre. But not just any lyre. This one is hand-carved, polished smooth, and etched with small sun rays along the neck. The wood glows faintly with oil and time. It's not perfect. One of the tuning pegs is slightly crooked. But it's yours in a way that feels unexpectedly grounding. I may have suggested, Admetus says, that you needed one that doesn't look like it's held together by spider webs and hope. You touch the strings. They hum softly, an A minor chord, if you're not mistaken. You're not sure what to say. Words don't quite fit in the space this gift occupies. So you just nod, pluck a single soft note and offer, Well, now I have to write a song about cows. Admetus lights up. Please call it Pasture of My Heart. No. He tries again. Utterly yours? Absolutely not. Bovinity and beyond? You sigh. Do your cows ever stampede out of sheer embarrassment? Only when I sing, he says proudly. You spend the afternoon tuning the lyre and playing small melodies for the herd. Each cow gets a theme now. Shorter, tighter, more rhythmic. You're refining your method, and it works. Glyke responds to a quick triple beat. Strabo seems to prefer a descending scale in minor thirds. Calliope, predictably, refuses to respond unless the song includes dramatic pauses and long, judgmental silences. Phryxa now trots in circles when you play anything above a certain tempo. You begin to suspect she's actually leading you, not the other way around. Timandra brings you an extra helping of soup that night and mutters something about sun-blessed fingers. She doesn't look at you directly. She just leaves a honey cake wrapped in cloth and shuffles off before you can thank her. The villagers are growing bolder, not in a confrontational way, just reverent, respectful. A few even bow slightly when they pass you near the fig tree. One child, wide-eyed and missing a front tooth, leaves you a drawing of a cow playing a lyre. You keep that one. It's not accurate, but the spirit is there. At sunset, Admetus calls you to the olive grove. He's standing beside a small, unremarkable stone slab. You've seen it before, half covered in moss, forgotten under the canopy. What is this? You ask. My father's marker, he replies softly. He never liked temples. Said the sky was the only ceiling worth praying under. You watch him as he kneels and brushes away a fallen leaf. He ruled before me. Different style. Less cows. More war. You nod. He would have liked you, I think. Said the gods never showed up when he needed them. I imagine he'd find it funny that one did now, and brought a lyre. You chuckle gently. I'm not sure I brought much, you say. Admetus shakes his head. You brought stillness. You'd be amazed how rare that is. He pours a small libation of wine onto the stone, then offers you the cup. You pour a few drops yourself, unsure whether to whisper a prayer or just stand in silence. You choose the latter. Historians still argue whether Apollo's presence in Admetus's life had broader political or religious consequences. Some versions imply Thessaly became more peaceful, more prosperous, or more musical during that year. Others focus only on the friendship, the strange quiet bond that formed between king and god. Unspoken, but enduring. Later, you return to your nook, the new lyre resting beside you like a sleeping cat. You play a soft tune for no one, maybe for the stars, maybe for Admetus's father, maybe just for yourself. The cows stir in their sleep. Keros chuffs once, then settles again. And somewhere in the distance, a faint breeze carries the scent of rosemary and fig blossoms. You drift off to sleep with a charm at your belt, a new lyre at your side, and a name, whatever it is the villagers whisper, curling around your dreams like a warm thread. The rain starts sometime just before dawn. It's not the gentle kind either. Not the romantic drizzle poets write about while sighing into clay mugs. No, this is aggressive rain, sloppy, determined, borderline theatrical. The kind of rain that seems personally offended by your continued efforts to stay dry. By the time you roll out of your nook, Keros has already relocated to a slightly drier corner of the stable. looking up at you with an expression that reads, "I warned you about roof leaks." You nod at him solemnly and wring out your blanket. Outside, the world is soggy. The olive trees weep. The sheep look damp and insulted. The pasture has transformed into a series of connected puddles with occasional cow-shaped islands. And in the middle of it all, Thelxia is spinning in slow circles, delighted. You trudge out, sandals squelching with each step. The cows, mercifully, are mostly in place. Though they're clustered together under a makeshift shelter you definitely don't remember building. It looks suspiciously like someone rearranged fence panels and used a fruit cart as a wall. Admetus appears beside you, soaked to the knees and carrying a clay pot over his head like a helmet. "I see the goddess of weather favors the dramatic today," he says, grinning. You squint up at the clouds. Or she's just trying to mess with my hairstyle. Too late for that. He gestures toward the field, where Frixa is attempting to moonwalk across a muddy slope. "You want to take the left side, or should I?" You look down at your now brown robe, shrug and say, "I'll go where my dignity hasn't already drowned." The day becomes a symphony of slipping, slogging, and soggy mooing. You lose a sandal. Twice. Glyke keeps licking rain off your sleeve like it's soup. Calliope tries to intimidate a puddle and ends up sulking in the corner. At one point, Kairos decides the best way to help is to sprint through the mud and bark at a bale of hay. You thank him for his bravery. By midday, the field is a war zone of hoof prints, overturned buckets, and what may or may not be your other sandal floating toward the fig tree. You and Admetus retreat to the storage shed to regroup. He hands you a cloth that does nothing to dry you, but somehow makes you feel slightly less pitiful. You sit on opposite crates, dripping and steaming slightly. "You ever wonder," he says, "if the gods are watching us like we're in a very slow, very wet play?" You raise an eyebrow. If they are, I hope they're bored. He laughs. Somehow, I doubt that. Historians still argue whether this episode, if it truly occurred, was symbolic of seasonal renewal or divine cleansing. But if any spiritual insight was meant to be extracted from this day, it's buried somewhere under 6 inches of mud and cow droppings. As the rain slackens in the late afternoon, the cows finally start to settle. They gather in small groups, heads lowered, tails twitching, emitting the occasional damp snort. You lead them one by one to a higher patch of grass, playing your lyre as you go. The sound is soft, the strings faintly out of tune from the humidity, but the rhythm comforts them, and quietly comforts you. You realize something as you watch them nudge each other into position. You care, not as a divine obligation or some poetic metaphor. You just genuinely care if they're warm, dry, and not chewing anything poisonous. That night, the storm dies with a final grumble, and the stars return. Shy, blinking, barely visible behind the clouds. You sit on your stool by the stable, wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping barley broth Timandra insisted would restore your vital warmths. It tastes like boiled regret and moss, but you drink it anyway. Admetus joins you. He's wearing a new cloak, patchy, slightly burned in one corner, and humming softly. You ask, "Where did you get that one?" He shrugs. "A merchant left it here 3 years ago. Said it was cursed. Never came back for it." Feeling cursed? He smiles. Only when you play in Lydian mode. You pluck a very deliberate Lydian scale. He groans. You smile. Before bed, you do one last walk through the pasture. Thelxipea is curled in a nest of hay. Strabo is standing suspiciously close to your clean robe. Phryxa is, somehow, back in the laundry tub. You fix what you can. Straighten the fence. Toss some extra feed. Hum a few bars of your cow's soothing melody. When you return to your nook, you find something unexpected. A clean pair of sandals. Handmade, modest, and definitely not yours. There's no note, just a bit of straw braided into a loop and tucked inside. You sit down slowly. Maybe it's from Admetus, maybe Tamandra, maybe a villager who noticed you limping slightly after chasing a runaway bucket into a ditch. You don't know, but it's kind and quiet and utterly mortal. You slide your feet into the sandals. They fit. You fall asleep that night, listening to the soft breathing of cows, the faint creak of drying wood, and the wind threading gently through the olive branches. No thunder, no omens, just rest, just rain-washed peace. It takes you less than 4 steps into the field the next morning to realize something terrible has happened. Mud, everywhere. But not just any mud. That mud. The thick, sticky, soul-devouring kind that pulls your sandals off and then asks for your will to live. The pasture is a battlefield of hoofprints and craters. Someone, likely Potamos, has turned the watering trough into a personal spa. Phryxa appears to have attempted a high-speed turn in the rain-soaked earth and left behind a perfect cow-shaped skid mark. You close your eyes. Breathe deeply. The air smells like wet straw, regret, and questionable onions. And then, splat! Something hits the back of your tunic. You spin, slowly, deliberately. Calliope stares at you, chewing innocently. Behind her, Glyke is licking what might be a ball of compressed mud from the fence rail. Admetus, of course, chooses this exact moment to appear with a cheerful, "Morning." You glance at your tunic, at the mud, at the smirking cows. "I take it diplomacy has failed," he says. "They've declared war," you reply. "This is no longer a pasture. It's a mud-based uprising." He laughs unhelpfully. "We'll need to reinforce the path. They've trampled the whole north end." He gestures to a wheelbarrow filled with new planks, rope, and something that might once have been a shovel. You both spend the next 3 hours attempting to create a makeshift walkway across the pasture using flattened crates, old cart pieces, and sheer, sun god stubbornness. It does not go smoothly. Strabo walks directly through the middle of your work and knocks over a fence post. Thelxipea follows, then tries to nap on the newly placed planks. At one point, Keros digs a hole into the walkway and proudly deposits a pine cone. You pause, breathe, then burst out laughing. It comes from your ribs, the kind of laugh you don't plan. Admetus joins in, half bent over, wiping his eyes. The cows blink at you both like you've finally cracked under pressure, which, fair. Later, after the walkway is complete, and by complete you mean still mostly mud, but now with ambition, Admetus surprises you with something else. A new tunic. It's plain, brown, with sun stitching at the hems, subtle, almost hidden. He tosses it to you with a casual, "You might want to retire the mud cape." You inspect it. It's your size. Comfortable fabric, clearly made with care. "Thanks," you say. Then add, "You didn't have to." He shrugs. "I didn't have to lend you my flute either, but here we are." You change in the stable. hiding behind a stack of feed sacks. Keros guards the entrance with exaggerated seriousness. When you step out, Admetus gives a small nod of approval. Looks good. Makes you look less like you fell out of a tree. I was pushed, you say. By the weather? By fate. He grins. Same thing. That evening, you try a new tune, one that matches the rhythm of hooves in shallow mud. A kind of squelchy, upbeat march. You hum it softly as you guide the herd in, and to your surprise, it works. They follow more smoothly. They waddle in time. Strabo even pauses before stepping on your foot. Progress. You and Admetus sit by the fire after dinner, sipping mint tea, Timandra's new obsession. She claims it keeps dreams from getting too opinionated. And listening to the cows settle, he leans back, watching sparks rise into the dark. You know, he says, the villagers are talking about you again. You raise an eyebrow. Have they run out of livestock ailments to assign to me? No, he says. They're saying you're the reason the cows haven't gotten sick, that you've been protecting the herds. You pause, then say, that's not untrue, but also not entirely true. You sip your tea. I haven't not been protecting them. He nods. You're a very confusing man. You smile. Thank you. Historians still argue whether Apollo's influence as a cowherd introduced new musical practices to agricultural communities. Some early folk songs from the Thessalian region include rhythms suspiciously similar to known Delphic hymns. Whether coincidence or divine blending, the songs remain, and some, they say, still make the cows walk straighter when played in certain modes. That night, you sleep well, deeply, the kind of sleep that's earned through mud, effort, and a perfectly tuned lyre string vibrating faintly through your dreams. Outside, the moon is high. The mud is still there. But somehow, it doesn't feel like a mess anymore. It feels like part of the rhythm. You've never been to a mortal birthday party before. Well, not as a participant. You've observed them, of course, usually from a respectable divine distance. A few centuries ago, you hovered invisibly above a Spartan celebration that involved shouting competitions and roasted ox tongues. And once, during a brief escapade in Ephesus, you were almost offered a slice of cake made entirely of lentils. But this is different. This is Admetus's birthday. And according to Timandra, that means everyone is obligated to be festive, or at least pretend very convincingly. She begins preparations 2 days early. The kitchen becomes a war zone of chopped herbs, steaming pots, loud declarations about texture control, and threats involving wild oregano. You're politely told to stay out of the way, unless you're willing to peel 5 dozen boiled eggs without singing at them. You choose the pasture instead. Even the cows are abuzz. Well, muddy and chewing more thoughtfully than usual. Glyke keeps wandering toward the courtyard as if she's on the guest list. Phryxa finds a ribbon and wears it around one ear like she's auditioning for something. You don't ask what. By mid-morning on the actual day, the estate transforms. Banners are hung between olive trees. A long table appears in the courtyard, covered with mismatched jugs, fig platters, and one very ambitious pyramid of cheese. Children race past, carrying lyres made of sticks and kitchen twine. Someone's roasting a goat on a spit. You feel vaguely guilty about that. But you don't know the goat personally, so you let it go. Admetus is nowhere to be seen. You find him by the river, skipping stones with alarming accuracy. He doesn't look particularly celebratory. I thought kings were supposed to enjoy public praise, you say, offering him a flat rock. I don't mind the praise, he says. It's the toasts I'm worried about. You chuckle. Let me guess. Every cousin from a distant village wants to remind you of the time you fell in a wine barrel. I was 9. Doesn't matter. He sighs. Will you be there? I've been forcibly assigned a seat by Timandra. Then I'll survive. The celebration begins with a burst of flute music and a cascade of olive petals from a young girl who takes her role as official petal dropper very seriously. Guests arrive from all directions. Farmers, merchants, traveling musicians. One man who claims to be a bard, but brought no instruments and is suspiciously fond of snacks. The cows watch from the pasture. You suspect they're taking notes. You're seated next to Timandra, who's still in kitchen mode. Eyes sharp, ladle tucked into her belt like a weapon. The feast is overwhelming. Platters of roasted squash, stewed lentils, pickled figs, honeyed bread, olive tapenade, and something involving melted goat cheese and hope. You eat everything offered, occasionally humming softly to yourself between bites. A child leans in and whispers, "Is it true you can turn olives into gold?" You smile. Only the wrinkly ones. They scamper away, thrilled. Then come the toasts. Admetus endures them with practiced grace. The speech from his uncle is 9 minutes of rambling metaphors involving sheep and the stars. A cousin shares a story about Admetus falling into a pond while trying to impress a girl with his flute skills. You pretend to be shocked. He pretends not to die inside. Finally, someone says, "Maybe the new Cowherd would like to play a tune." You're already reaching for your lyre. The courtyard hushes. You pluck a slow, soft melody. Simple at first, like morning light slipping through the trees. Then you build it. A rising theme that mimics laughter, cowbells, and the flutter of leaves. Somewhere in the middle, Glyke moves gently from the pasture, perfectly in tune. The final note fades into silence. Then, applause. Not thunderous, just warm, grateful, a few tears. Someone near the olives burps with emotion. Admetus claps last, slow and sincere. "You've raised the standard," he says. "No pressure for next year." As the sun sets, guests linger in small clusters. Children chase fireflies. Someone starts juggling figs. You find yourself seated near the fig tree, a cup of wine in hand, a small piece of honey cake crumbling into your tunic. Admetus joins you. Not bad for a man who doesn't like birthdays. He shrugs. It's better with music. You glance toward the cows. One of them, probably Strabo, is wearing a flower crown. "You know," you say, "this might be the first mortal celebration I've attended where no one's tried to offer me a goat or marry me off." He grins. There's still time. You raise your cup. To aging without divine interference. To herding cows and dodging toasts. You clink cups. Historians still argue whether the tale of Apollo's year with Admetus influenced local festival traditions. Some say the king's birthday feast became a minor holiday, celebrated with music, fig bread, and reenactments of the time Apollo played lyre solos to get out of uncomfortable conversations. Others believe the entire myth was built because of such a festival, not the other way around. Either way, tonight is real. The stars blink overhead. The cows settle in. The guests begin to leave. You sit beneath the fig tree, Admetus beside you, Charos snoring nearby, and a breeze carrying the last notes of the celebration into the dark. No chariots, no thunder, just laughter, music, and the glow of fireflies. For a moment, it doesn't matter who you were before this, only who you are now. The child has drawn you again. You find the new picture on the pasture fence, pinned with a twig and weighted by what appears to be half a dried apricot. The paper is crinkled, the ink a little smudged from dew, but the image is unmistakable. A tall figure with a lyre, curly hair like sunbeams, surrounded by cows that all have names written next to them: Calliope, Flexipia, Melis, and one simply labeled Fast Cow. There are also, somehow, sparkles. You suspect crushed olives were involved. You smile and tuck the picture gently into your tunic. That makes 5 now. 5 wildly enthusiastic renderings of you looking heroic in sandals, often glowing and occasionally flying, which has never happened in this particular life. But you appreciate the flair. The artist, you suspect, is the same missing-toothed child from the village who once asked if you could turn bugs into butterflies if you say please hard enough. You'd told her, only if the bugs are willing. Lately, the drawings have become more detailed. There are rumors that one was pinned to the temple wall in town, labeled the Cowherd of Light. Another, according to Timandra's niece, was folded into a basket of laundry and made it all the way to a neighboring village before someone noticed the divine figure on the back of a tunic. You're becoming a myth before your year's even finished. Admetus doesn't mention the pictures, but you catch him glancing at one when he thinks you're not looking. He says nothing, but his smile betrays quiet amusement, or quiet concern, possibly both. That afternoon, the temple priest from the next village arrives, unannounced, and very dramatically on a donkey with silver bells on its harness. His robes are particularly white. His sandals look untouched by earth. He carries a scroll and the air of a man who knows things and is mildly disappointed you don't already know that he knows them. He's heard the rumors, of course. You're the cowherd with the music, the one who sings storms away, the one who cured the goat, the one the cows follow like bees to honey. You try to look humble, or confused, or both. People say you glow, he adds, at night. I wear a lot of olive oil, you reply. He narrows his eyes. They say you've walked barefoot across thorns. I have excellent soles. He frowns. They say you speak to the stars. You pause. That one, at least, is not untrue. You meet his gaze and say nothing. He hands you a sprig of laurel. If you are who I suspect you are, he says carefully, then I hope the gods are treating you fairly. And if not, I hope we are. He leaves without asking for a song, a miracle, or even a cup of tea. The donkey kicks over a basket of figs on his way out. Later, Admetus finds you at the fig tree. You're holding the laurel, still undecided whether to keep it or toss it to Charos. He knows, Admetus says, sitting beside you. Probably. Do you want to stop hiding? You think about it. Not yet, he nods. When you're ready. That night, you walk the pastures with your new lyre. The cows trail behind you, not because they must, but because they want to. You sing softly, half lullaby, half melody you don't even know you know. Something ancient and slow, older than any shrine or scroll. You pause at the fence. there's a new offering. A basket of olives, a little round cake, and a piece of linen with your name stitched, poorly, crookedly, into the corner. It reads, Apollo, which you suppose is close enough. You don't take it. You leave it on the stone near the small shrine rock, beneath the sun-carved charm. But you smile. Tamandra joins you briefly before bed, holding a steaming mug and a look that suggests she's caught you in a moment you might try to pretend wasn't happening. I told you, she says, sipping. The village sees things long before the priests do. They've seen too much, you reply lightly. She snorts. They haven't seen enough. Wait till you hit them with a harvest song. You raise an eyebrow. You want me to sing to your carrots? Not unless you want them to start walking. You both laugh softly. Then she adds, more quietly, they trust you, even if they don't know why. You nod. I'm beginning to trust them too. Historians still argue whether Apollo's presence was revealed openly before his sentence ended, or whether he simply faded back into legend when the year was up. Some say the children were the first to guess. Others claim the cows themselves bowed as he left. All the stories agree on one thing. The myth began with whispers, drawings, songs, fragments of belief woven into the daily rhythms of fields and festivals. You look up at the stars, the laurel still in your hand. Maybe a god doesn't need temples to be remembered. Maybe a pasture is enough. Zeus sends a message. Of course, it couldn't be simple. Not a letter, not a subtle change in the wind. No, your father, king of Olympus, storm thrower extraordinaire, chooses to deliver his communication via eagle. A massive, gold-eyed eagle, wings wide as a cart, gliding silently out of the afternoon sky and landing smack in the middle of the courtyard. It scatters 3 children, 2 chickens, and 1 startled fig vendor. It holds a scroll in its beak. You sigh, loudly. The eagle drops the scroll at your feet, gives you a look that might be disgust or just bird arrogance, and lifts off again with a single whoosh that knocks over a wine jug. Admetus appears just in time to see it vanish over the rooftops. Friend of yours? Messenger of the storm, you mutter. Bringer of dramatic timing. You unroll the scroll. The handwriting is unmistakable, bold, impatient, and slightly uneven, as if it's used to being carved into stone rather than written with a reed. Are you done being humble yet? Olympus is missing your smug silence. Let me know if you're planning to stay mortal forever. Also, stop glowing at dusk. It's confusing the nymphs. It's unsigned, but there's a thunderbolt drawn at the bottom. You guess that counts. Admetus reads over your shoulder. He seems affectionate. He has a style. Is this about your punishment? You nod slowly. 1 year of service, a full cycle. Then I'm free to return. The question is, Admetus waits, whether I want to. He says nothing, but his hand rests briefly on your shoulder before he turns, walks back toward the estate. You keep the scroll, not for sentimental reasons, but because you think it might make good kindling if Zeus gets too dramatic again. Later, while tending to the herd, you catch yourself watching the sky more than usual. You don't mean to, but it's habit now. Looking for signs, portents, clouds shaped like rebukes. There are none. Just a long, slow breeze and a very determined butterfly following Glyke for no apparent reason. Still, something feels close. You take the cows to the upper meadow, the one with the view over the valley. It's your favorite spot. The grass is soft, the air's sweet, and you can see 3 villages, 2 streams, and a hill where someone once carved a spiral into the rocks. You sit and play your lyre, a simple melody, something to anchor you to the earth. The cows drift in lazy half-circles. Even Frixa seems content to nap instead of sprint. Then, another breeze. This one warmer, familiar, and in it, a whisper. Not a voice, not words, just a sense, a suggestion in the wind. Don't forget who you are. You close your eyes. Do gods forget? Or do they just soften? That night, Admetus joins you by the fire. No one speaks for a while. The flames crackle. Somewhere in the dark, Keros lets out a bark in his sleep. Then Admetus says, "You've changed." You glance at him. "I mean it," he continues. "You used to walk like the ground was lucky to carry you. Now you walk like you feel it." You don't respond immediately. Then, "I'm not sure if that's growth or punishment." He smirks. "Why not both?" You laugh quietly. Then he says, softer now, "When the year is up, will you stay?" You stare into the fire. "I don't know." Historians still argue over whether Apollo considered abandoning Olympus. Some rare versions of the myth suggest he asked to remain among mortals, anonymously, quietly, tending cattle and playing music for shepherds. Others insist he returned the moment his sentence was up. His humility lesson learned and filed away under character development. But in this moment, there is no certainty. Just firelight, just stars, just a question with no easy answer. You pluck a soft melody before bed, something slow and circular. Music that doesn't end so much as wind inward. The cow moves sleepily in response. And overhead, the sky offers no lightning, no signs, just peace. You lose a cow. This is not one of those, "Oh, she's just hiding behind a bush" situations. No, this is a full-fledged, no hoof prints, no mooing, entirely vanished divine cow scenario. It's Melas, the calm one, the one who only responds to melodies in Dorian mode and never, never wanders more than a few paces from his favorite mossy rock. Gone. You realize it just after midday, during your routine count. 31 cows standing peacefully in their usual muddied formation, chewing and blinking like they've never done anything suspicious in their lives. And one very notable absence. You count again. Still 31. You whistle his tune. Nothing. Not even a rustle in the olive trees. "Very funny," you say aloud, because that's the only reaction your pride will allow. "Hilarious." The cows ignore you. You search the nearby brush, the lower field, the grove. The shady spot where Thelxipea once tried to start her own breakaway herd. Nothing. By sunset, Admetus joins the search, trailed by a shepherd, 2 of his more motivated cousins, and 1 goat who's mostly just here for the walk. They scour the perimeter, ask nearby villagers, knock on the door of a slightly suspicious beekeeper. Still no Melas. "This is not good," Admetus says quietly. "I noticed." "Is he important?" You pause, then say, "They're all important." He nods. Doesn't press, but he's worried. And so are you. You sit under the fig tree, turning over the possibilities. Did he wander into the hills? Get stolen? Did something else take him? A divine cow, even in mortal disguise, isn't something to misplace lightly, especially not one as peaceful and well-tempered as Melas. You play his song again, louder. Just a few soft bars under your breath, letting the notes roll into the evening air. Nothing. The next morning, a stranger arrives. Not a priest, not a villager. Someone different. Older than he looks, wears a hood, carries a staff with odd carvings, has the kind of walk that suggests he knows more about the land than it knows about itself. You greet him by the stables. "Traveler?" you ask. He nods. "Oracle, technically. But I'm Moonlight." "Moonlight is what?" "Messenger. Weather interpreter. Sometimes fortune teller if the audience is easily impressed." You narrow your eyes. "And today?" "Today I'm here to tell you about your missing cow." You blink. He smiles. "He's safe. For now." You try to stay calm. "Where?" The man taps his staff against the ground. "Further west. A place where the earth dips and the wind forgets how to sing. Not far, but not easy." You glance toward the hills. "Who took him?" The oracle shrugs. "Hard to say. Could have wandered. Could have been drawn. Some creatures like the smell of music." You tense. "Creatures?" He raises a hand. Nothing too unfriendly. But time matters. Then he leans in. "You're being watched, you know." You don't answer. He grins. "Good. It's better when gods listen before they speak." Then he walks away, leaving a trail of dust and a single olive pit on the ground. You stare after him for a long time. That evening, you prepare to leave. Admetus catches you just as you're packing a satchel. Lyre, cloak, rope, a flask of strong tea Tamandra insists is very good for finding things. Keros sits by the door, already vibrating with anticipation. "Tell me what's going on," Admetus says. You hesitate. "A cow is missing." "Yes, you said that. But this one means more, doesn't he?" You meet his gaze. "He's part of something I was entrusted with. If I fail..." Admetus nods. "You're not going alone." You raise an eyebrow. "I'm king," he says. "And it's been a very long time since I left this valley. Besides, I've got a cousin who owes me 3 favors and a donkey." Within an hour, the two of you and Keros are on the road westward, leaving the estate under Tamandra's temporary command. She doesn't seem pleased, but she arms herself with a soup ladle and a long list of rules, which the cows appear to understand. You travel into the twilight, your footsteps crunching along a narrow trail that curves between stone outcrops and rows of sleepy vines. As you walk, Admetus hums softly. You realize it's Melas's tune. You join in. The sound curls through the air like a thread, golden, gentle, impossible to ignore. In the distance, far beyond the hills, something moves faintly, just once. But it's enough. He's out there, and you're going to bring him home. You reach the edge of the forest just after midnight. The moon is a slim silver coin overhead, slicing the treetops into strange silhouettes. The air smells of pine, damp moss, and something else, something brittle, like old stone or burnt time. Even the crickets seem to have gone to bed early. Admetus walks ahead, steady but silent. Keros trots beside him, tail stiff, ears alert. You trail behind, Lyre strapped to your back, feet crunching softly over the leaf litter. Every now and then, the wind shifts and you hear it again. Faint, low, unmistakable. A moo, distant, echoed, tired, Melas. You follow the sound into the trees. It's not a trail exactly, more like the ghost of one. Branches tug at your cloak, twigs snap underfoot. Keros growls once, softly, then presses ahead. You feel the earth change beneath your soles too. The soil grows colder, the air thicker. Even your breath feels slightly heavier in your chest. And then you see it. The hollow. It's not large, but it feels like it should be. A depression in the forest floor, ringed by black stones and thick tree roots. In the center stands Melas, blinking at you like you're late for something important. Next to him, there's a figure. Not human, not quite divine either. They wear a long cloak of reeds and shadow, and their face, if there is one, is covered with a shifting mask of bark and moss. Eyes like two raindrops, hands folded neatly, patiently. "Return what's mine," you say softly. The figure tilts its head. "I borrowed," it replies, in a voice like leaves underfoot. "Not stole." "Melas is not for borrowing." "No," it murmurs. "He came willingly. He heard the music in my roots." You step closer. "He's not yours to keep." Admetus reaches for his staff, but you stop him with a hand. This isn't a fight of weapons. It's a song. You unclip your lyre. Softly, slowly, you begin to play. The same tune Melas responds to every morning. His song. The one you made up while watching him sleep with his nose tucked under his leg, while you plucked chords with muddy fingers. The first note is uncertain. The second steadies. By the fourth, Melas lifts his head. By the seventh, he takes a step forward. The figure does not move, but its cloak ripples ever so slightly, like grass bowing to wind. "You call well," it whispers. "But do you listen?" You pause, still strumming, and say nothing. "You're more like me than you think," it says. "You came from sky and sun, but now you walk the ground. You feel the breath of cows, the weight of hooves." It gestures at Melas. "He came to me because he heard something older than Olympus, something rooted, something that doesn't fly, it waits." You say, "That may be, but he's not done with me yet." A silence, then the figure exhales, and the sound is like bark cracking in the spring. "Take him," it says. "But don't forget that even gods have roots sometimes." And just like that, it fades, dissolves into the trees, a gust of pine-scented wind. Nothing more. Melas walks toward you, slow but steady. You kneel and rub behind his ear. He exhales deeply, as if relieved, as if the whole thing was just a brief misadventure and not a brush with ancient woodland mystery. Admetus exhales too. Is it always this weird being a god? You chuckle, only on days that end in Y. The walk back is quiet, peaceful even. You guide Melas along the trail, Keros circling to herd gently from behind. The sun begins to rise just as you cross the ridge. It's a slow, golden bloom, and with it, something else. The cows at the pasture fence are waiting, all 31 of them. You can feel it before you see it, that soft, collective exhale, that sense of rightness returning. Melas steps into the field. There's a rustle, a shift, and then the others surround him, nudging, sniffing, bumping him like a returned sibling who forgot to write. Calliope stands tall and still, giving him one long, slow blink of judgment before turning back to her patch of grass. Admetus claps a hand on your shoulder. "Well," he says, "you retrieved a cow from a forest spirit without getting turned into a root vegetable. I'd call that a win." You smile. That's a very specific bar for success. And yet, you cleared it. You sit in your usual spot beneath the fig tree later that afternoon, your lyre on your lap. cup of something warm beside you. You pluck Melas's song. He turns his head. You pluck Calliope's. She ignores you, obviously. Then, just for fun, you play the melody the forest whispered back to you. A deep, slow line of notes with space between them like breaths, like soil slowly turning. You don't know what it means yet, but it feels like something worth remembering. Historians rarely mention Melas by name, but in some obscure songs, collected from herders long after the myth faded, there's mention of a cow that wandered too far, and a god who sang him home. You look at Melas now, content in his field, tail flicking lazily, eyes half shut in the sun. Home indeed. The offerings begin to multiply. You try not to encourage it. Really, you do. But ever since you brought Melas back, and more importantly, safely, the village has entered what Timandra calls a phase. Each morning, you find more items left at the little stone by the fig tree. Figs wrapped in mint leaves, tiny woven lyres, shiny rocks, scraps of poetry, a carved spoon, an olive in the shape of a heart, you think? And once, bafflingly, a slightly used sandal with a note attached that read, "Thank you for curing my foot." Probably you. It's sweet, strange, and a little overwhelming. You don't take the items. Not all of them anyway. Some go to Keros, who is now convinced he's part of your cult. Others you quietly tuck into a box behind the stable. But a few you keep close. The spoon is useful. The mint leaves smell like memories. And one small clay cow, glazed in blue and clearly made by a child, now lives by your bedroll. Admetus notices, of course. He never says anything about it directly. But one evening, as you're both feeding the cows, he gestures to a child darting away from the fence after leaving what appears to be a shell necklace. "Not many cowherds get shrine offerings," he says casually. You look over. Not many cowherds play lullabies in 4-part harmony. You glowing again? A little. Should I worry? You shrug. Only if I start levitating the cheese. He smirks and continues tossing feed into troughs. That night, there's a soft knock at your door. It's Timandra, holding a cup of what she claims is calming root tea. You suspect it's just water and wishful thinking. She doesn't enter, just stands in the doorway, backlit by the faint lantern light from the kitchen. "They're going to start asking questions soon," she says. You nod. I don't think they mind that you're not one of them, but they might want to understand. You take the cup, do you? I understand that no one sings cows to sleep like you do, and none of our gods bother showing up for laundry duty. She pauses, then adds, "And I understand you're kind, which is more than I can say for some of the gods I've met." You blink. You've met? She raises a brow. Let's just say I know how to spot lightning when it's pretending to be a candle. Then she's gone. The next day, a group of villagers begins constructing what they call a bench of rest near your fig tree. You try to object. They wave you off. You're always sitting there anyway. The bench is crooked, painted with flowers and little suns, and one leg is slightly shorter than the others. You sit on it anyway. A few children begin to gather when you play now. Not too close, but close enough to listen. They sway in rhythm, eyes wide, mouths open in quiet awe. One day, a girl brings a song she wrote. It's 3 lines long. It rhymes sun with bun. You call it a masterpiece. Another child offers to help brush the cows. You hand him the world's least cooperative broom. He manages 2 strokes before being sneezed on by Calliope. He declares himself spiritually purified and goes home singing. It's official. You are a thing now. Not just the cowherd. Something more. Admetus joins you at the fig tree one night. Wine jug in hand, stars blinking lazily above. I've been thinking, he says, pouring 2 cups. About when you leave. You don't answer. I know the stories. I know the gods always return to their heights, back to clouds and nectar and thrones made of clouds. You sip your wine. But what if you didn't? You glance at him. What if I stayed? He nods. And did what exactly? Continue music therapy? He laughs. Why not? Be a quiet god. One who plants things, plays songs, keeps cows calm and children amused. You consider it. The idea is tempting, dangerous even. Mortals would expect more, you say. Shrines, sacrifices, power. He shrugs. Maybe not. Maybe they just ask you to keep being what you already are. Historians still argue whether Apollo truly grew fond of mortal life during his exile. Some stories suggest he wept when he left. Others claim he lingered for months past the end of his sentence, unsure of where he belonged. The truth? You haven't decided yet. But it's getting harder to imagine leaving. You sit on your crooked bench, watching the cows blink sleepily in the moonlight, and play a melody that only they understand. Soft, gentle, rooted, and around you, mortals dream easy dreams. Because you're here. For now. It starts with bread, specifically a round loaf, still warm, delivered by a bashful village woman who claims it's just to say thank you for the weather lately. You glance at the cloudless sky, then at the loaf, which is suspiciously shaped like a lyre. Not good, not bad. Just telling. Admetus sees it on the table and raises an eyebrow. Is it happening? He asks, biting into a fig like it's a tactical move. You sigh. It might be happening. By it, you both mean worship, not full-blown temples and doves, yet. But it started, quietly, softly, with small gestures. A loaf here, a bundle of lavender there. Someone painted a sunburst on the barn wall and insists it's a seasonal decoration. You haven't performed any grand miracles. Not publicly, at least. You haven't turned water into wine or smitten any disbelievers. You've simply shown up, played music, healed a goat or 2, herded cows, sang lullabies. And that seems to be enough. You try to ignore it. You tend to the cows. You trim fence posts. You teach Strabo not to walk through wet laundry. But it builds. Children begin whispering blessings before meals that include the words, "May the singer keep the cows safe." Someone starts lighting a candle before your morning walks. A merchant from a neighboring town arrives asking if you'll bless her olive cart. You smile. Say something vague. Try not to glow. One afternoon, you find yourself sitting with Admetus under the fig tree, watching the clouds crawl lazily across the hills. You could stop it, he says. You nod. Probably. But you haven't. Another nod. Because you pluck a slow chord on your lyre. They're not worshiping a god, you say softly. Not really. They're honoring someone who helped, who stayed, who listened. Admetus leans back, which is rare. For mortals, maybe. For gods, almost unheard of. He considers that. Then, does it bother you? You pause. No, you say. It humbles me, which is probably Zeus's favorite part. He laughs. So, what now? You gesture to the field. I've got 32 reasons not to leave yet. Later that week, a group of women from the village come to the estate asking permission to build a small alcove in the outer wall. Nothing big, just a niche for offerings. Some flowers. Maybe a little shelf. Admetus turns to you, arms crossed. Your call? You think for a long moment, then say, only if the shelf is sturdy. It takes 2 days to finish. The shrine, such as it is simple. A smooth stone slab, a carved sun, a painted tile that looks slightly like your nose. They place bundles of barley, honey cakes, and a single carved cow figure at its base. You leave a flower one night, quietly, unseen, just to be polite. Historians still argue whether Apollo's worship in Thessaly grew from this exile or was retroactively applied. A few scroll fragments reference the singing one who tamed the herd, often written alongside local fertility deities and minor pastoral spirits. One tablet, only partially legible, mentions a golden shepherd who taught cows to dream. It sounds flattering, embarrassing, almost accurate. A few nights later, as you play beneath the stars, a child sits beside you. She says nothing for a long time, just listens, watches your hands on the strings, then finally asks, "Are you a god?" You keep playing. The notes stretch softly into the night air. "What do you think?" you ask. She thinks. You don't act like one. You smile. "Is that good or bad?" She shrugs. "I think the cows like you. That's probably what matters." She offers you a fig, then skips off. You eat the fig, slowly, and wonder how something so simple could weigh more than any prophecy you've ever heard. That night, in your little nook, you find a new offering. Someone's placed a feather, a white one, faintly glowing, and a single word carved into a bit of olive wood. "Stay." You hold it in your hand for a long while. The cows are asleep. Kairos is twitching in his dreams. The estate is still. You stare up through the rafters at the stars. And for the first time since you arrived, you don't think about when you'll leave. You think about if. And that's a very different kind of music. You can hear it before you see it. The sound of a reed flute. Faint, wobbly, off-key in a way that suggests either deep artistic experimentation or someone attempting music while being distracted by cows. You follow it across the estate, past the olive press, around a startled Timandra, who huffs and mutters something about men with flutes and no practical skills, until you reach the pasture. And there he is, Admetus, standing in the middle of the field, 1 foot in a puddle, attempting to play a melody that resembles, at best, a confused snake trying to climb a ladder. The cows are watching, silently, not judging exactly, but aware. You cross your arms. You've chosen a difficult path, my friend. He lowers the flute. I'm practicing. For what? An agricultural summoning ritual? For the equinox. Ah, yes. The equinox, that seasonal turning point, when day and night share custody of the sky and farmers gather to sing, feast, and subtly compete over who has the largest onions. Traditionally, it includes a few modest ceremonies. A bit of wine, some dancing, a speech from the king. This year they want a performance. Apparently, word has spread to neighboring villages about the music, about the cows, about the man who glows softly at night and doesn't flinch when lightning strikes nearby. And now they want songs. You try not to panic. You could say no, you suggest. Admetus shrugs. They'll just build a stage and sing anyway. Might as well lead the show. He pauses. You'll help? You blink. Are you asking a god to be your backup musician? I'm asking a friend to make sure I don't embarrass myself in front of 100 drunk olive farmers. You consider. Then, fine, but only if I get to name the opening number. He grins. Please don't call it Ode to a Soggy Cow. No promises. Preparation begins the next morning. Timandra organizes the food, which is to say, she takes over with terrifying efficiency and assigns 12 villagers to chop things they can't identify. One unlucky boy is told to make the grapes anxious. Meanwhile, Admetus practices his flute with Charos, howling politely in the background. You begin arranging melodies, one simple enough for the villagers to learn, but rich enough to carry meaning. And the cows? They're rehearsing too, not that they know it. But you've noticed that if you play their songs at certain times of day, they begin to respond in rhythm. A sway here, a stomp there. Strabo accidentally invents a dance move involving slipping on grass and pretending it was intentional. You spend one afternoon teaching Glyke to bow on cue. She nails it, then tries to eat the lyre. By the day before the equinox, everything is nearly ready. The village square is cleared and decorated with garlands. A makeshift stage is built from old crates and optimism. Children paint sunbursts on every available surface. Someone carves a cow's face onto a gourd and insists it's symbolic. And then comes the surprise. You're in the olive grove, tuning your lyre, when a man from the neighboring village approaches with a scroll. He unrolls it with great ceremony. It's a poem, a hymn, to you. Written in clumsy meter, it calls you the light bringer, the moo singer, and bafflingly, he of the golden elbows. You stare at it. Did you write this? You ask. No, the man beams. It came to me in a dream. You close your eyes. You're putting this in the performance? Oh yes, right before the cheese juggling. That evening, you and Admetus sit beneath the fig tree. The air is quiet, heavy with expectation. You nervous? He asks. I've been on stage before. In front of mortals? You hesitate. No, you admit. Not like this. He looks at you for a long moment. Do you ever miss it? Olympus? The temples? The worship? You think of marble halls, of incense and chants, of golden statues and echoing prayers. Then you think of Glyke's head, nudging your shoulder, of children singing half-remembered cow melodies, of a crooked bench beside a fig tree. I miss parts of it, you say, but I don't miss not being here. He nods, then says, we're gonna mess up that first song tomorrow, aren't we? Absolutely. Excellent. Before bed, you light a small lantern and place it beside the new shrine. Not a divine gesture, just a bit of light. A reminder that someone is home. The cows sleep soundly. Charos snores louder than anyone has a right to. And above you, the stars seem just a little closer than usual. Tomorrow, you sing for them all. The sun rises to a village buzzing like a beehive in a lyre shop. It's Equinox Day, when the day and night split their time evenly, and mortals, for reasons no one entirely remembers, celebrate by roasting far too much meat and trying to walk in rhythm. You're woken not by cows or Charos, but by a child shouting, "He's up! The cow guy's up!" and then sprinting away like she's just seen a star sneeze. You sit up slowly, brush straw from your tunic, check your lyre, check yourself, still glowing slightly. Just nerves. Probably. By the time you make it to the village square, it's transformed. Fabric garlands crisscross overhead. Someone strung cowbells from a fig tree, creating a soft, melodic clinking every time the breeze shifts. There are stalls for food, places for dancing, and a suspicious number of people wearing sunburst pins. Admetus greets you in what must be his ceremonial tunic, an overly embroidered number featuring gold thread and the face of what you think is a lion, or possibly a confused dog. Too much? He asks. Just the right amount of tragic majesty. He bows. Then we're ready. The performance is set for midday, but the festivities begin early. There are contests, grape stomping, fig stacking, olive rolling, which quickly devolves into olive flinging. Children race while balancing eggs on spoons. A boy in a tunic 5 sizes too large attempts to recite poetry while balancing on one foot. You and Admetus warm up behind the stage. He runs scales on his flute. You tune your lyre and adjust the loops of your cloak. Kairos paces like a manager who doesn't trust the lighting setup. And then someone from the crowd calls out, "Where are the cows?" You blink. Admetus blinks. You exchange a slow, horrified look. And then you both run. Back at the estate, it's chaos. The pasture gate wide open. All 32 cows? Gone. Except one, Calliope, standing calmly by the open gate, chewing a wreath someone tried to tie to her horns. She blinks at you. "Well?" you ask. "Where do they go?" She turns her head, points her snout vaguely toward the hills. You sigh. Admetus groans. Kairos is already bounding ahead. You find them 15 minutes later. They're in the village. Every single one. Phryxa is trotting up and down the main road with a child riding her like a war horse. Thelxipea has discovered a fruit stand and is currently devouring a basket of overripe pears. Melas is serenely standing next to the cheese juggler. Strabo, bless his soul, is attempting to climb the stage. The villagers are not panicked. They're thrilled. "They came for the celebration," someone says. "They followed the music," says another. "They're part of the act," declares a third, who has clearly never seen your rehearsal notes. Admetus mutters, "We can't compete with hooved guest stars." You strum a calming melody, one you've used before to get them to settle. Within seconds, the cows begin to drift toward the stage. One by one, hooves clicking gently against stone, bells chiming, a slow, improbable parade of bovine performers. The audience cheers like this is exactly what they were hoping for. You glance at Admetus. He shrugs. "Let's give them a show." The performance begins. You stand center stage, lyre in hand. Admetus to your left with his flute. Kairos curls at your feet like a loyal, disgruntled mascot. You play the opening melody, a soft, winding tune that mirrors the sound of morning wind through olive trees. Admetus joins in, hitting almost the right notes. The villagers hum along, some shyly, some with full-chested joy. Then you change modes. Dorian, Mixolydian, a shift into something deeper. You play Melas's tune. He moves, on cue. Laughter from the crowd. Then Glyke's, then Strabo's. They move, not a dance. Just a slow, swaying response. Small steps, lazy turns. The kind of synchronized drifting only cows can pull off without trying. You guide them all with music, and somehow, The villagers join in, clapping, tapping, singing along. It's ridiculous and beautiful. And you realize, in the middle of the second chorus, that you've never felt more seen, not as a god, not as a symbol, but as a person, a musician, a cowherd, a friend. The set ends with a lullaby, one you've never played before, not in this life. It rises unbidden from your fingers, soft and ancient. The kind of melody that sounds like it's been waiting for years to be sung again. A goodbye and a welcome all in one. By the final chord, the village is silent. Then, slowly, applause. Real, warm, human. You look at Admetus. He's smiling, fully, freely. Then leans in and whispers, "So, what do we name the band?" You laugh. Not Mu harmonic convergence, I'll tell you that. Too late, I had tunics made. That night, the village glows with lanterns and wine. The cows are tucked in. The songs echo down alleys and over rooftops. You sit beneath the fig tree, Lyre in your lap, and for the first time in centuries, you feel complete. Not divine, not mortal. Just present. Someone starts humming your lullaby nearby. You don't stop them. You join in. The days after the festival stretch like warm honey across the fields. It's that particular lull that comes after celebration. When the decorations are still fluttering from trees, the cows are still slightly smug from their stage debut, and the villagers are still gently hung over, pretending to be very busy cleaning things they never noticed before. You, however, are restless. You feel it before you know it. A low hum beneath your ribs, a gentle ticking, like sandals on marble steps. The kind of feeling that means a change is coming. The year is nearly up. You haven't told Admetus, not directly, but he knows. You can feel it in the way he lingers a little longer in conversation, the way his eyes drift to the sky, as if watching for chariots or omens. The way he keeps avoiding the question neither of you have asked. When do you leave? You walk the pasture alone one morning. No flute, no lyre, just the cows and the cool whisper of dawn. They sense it too. Calliope snorts when you pass her. Strabo refuses to make eye contact. Phryxa nudges your arm like a child pretending not to be sad. You stop at the far edge of the field, where the grass fades into scrubby brush and the wind carries the scent of fig leaves and the sea beyond the hills. And you speak, not loudly, but clearly. I'm not ready. The sky, of course, does not answer, but the breeze softens. A small mercy. Later that day, while helping Timandra restack a very stubborn pile of olive jars, you notice something strange. A painting. Small, delicate, half hidden behind a curtain in the main hall. You pull it aside. It's you, but not divine you. Not glowing, not grand. Just sitting under the fig tree, lyre in hand, cows grazing lazily behind you. The brushwork is clumsy. The proportions are slightly off, but it feels right. Timandra appears beside you with a shrug. One of the children made it. Said they wanted to remember you in case you had to go back to the sky or whatever. You run your fingers lightly over the painted edge. I'm not sure I want to, you say. She hands you a jar. That's the trick, isn't it? When the life you didn't ask for starts to feel like the one you choose. You look at her. How did you know? You ask. About me? She smirks. You hummed in your sleep, once. In a scale I haven't heard since my grandmother used to mutter prayers in Anatolian hexameter. You blink. She shrugs. Also, your hair glows. Fair enough. That evening, Admetus finds you tuning your lyre by the fig tree. He doesn't say anything at first, just sits beside you, watching the cows file in for the night. Then, "You'll go soon." It's not a question. You nod. When the sun crests the hill on the morning of the last day, that was the deal. He breathes in, holds it, then exhales like it's heavier than it should be. You're not done, though. "No," you say. "But maybe that's the point." He looks over at you. Would you stay if you could? You consider, truly consider. "Yes," you say. But there's no magic clause, no loophole in Zeus's letter, no divine extension request form, just time. A ticking sun, a final sunrise, a soft farewell already blooming at the edges of your days. You spend the next few days as you always have, fixing fences, trimming the orchard, brushing burrs from Keros's tail, which he tolerates with dramatic sighs, and teaching one child how to play a C major chord on a lyre the size of a goat. You visit the village shrine, where someone has added your name to a candle. It's spelled wrong. You leave it anyway. You nap in the grove. You write down the melodies the cows respond to in a little notebook. You laugh at Admetus's jokes, even the ones about his own musical talents being best appreciated by goats. You do everything as though it were normal. But everything has a glow of finality. Historians often say Apollo left Admetus quietly, without ceremony. But they're wrong. There was no lightning, no golden chariot descending, no trumpet blast across the hills. But that doesn't mean there was no ceremony. Because the cows knew, the land knew, Admetus knew, and deep down, you knew too. The last night arrives like a soft footfall. No announcement, no divine trumpet. Just a change in the air, cooler, sweeter, threaded with the scent of olives and dust and something that might be jasmine or might be memory. You wake up before the stars have fully faded. The cows are already stirring, which is strange. They usually sleep in. Glyke lets out a breathy snort that sounds like a sigh. Mela stands, turns in a slow circle, then settles again. Phryxa won't stop watching you. They know. Even Keros is quiet. You move through the morning routine with care. Feeding, brushing, humming low lullabies under your breath. Every motion feels like a goodbye folded into something ordinary. You press your palm against each cow's side as you pass, feeling the warmth, the breath, the heartbeat. You skip breakfast. You're not hungry. Admetus finds you by the fig tree. He's brought 2 cups of tea and no small talk. He hands you one and sits. The tree creaks in the breeze. A few early olives drop like soft punctuation. You don't have to say anything. You tell him. "Good," he says, because I don't know what to say. You sit together in silence, sipping tea that tastes like chamomile and grief. Then, without looking at you, he says, "Would you have stayed?" You don't hesitate. "Yes?" He nods. "But you know me," you add. "I don't like staying put. Even when it's good? Especially then." He gives you a small, sad smile. "You're really not great at making this easier, you know." You set the cup down gently in the grass. "I'm sorry." When the sun finally rises over the hill, it's quiet. You stand. Smooth your tunic. Sling your lyre across your back. Keros watches, tail low, ears tipped forward. "I won't forget," you say softly. Admetus stands beside you. "You better not." You pause, then ask, "Will you tell them who I really was?" He shrugs. If they ask. And if they don't, I'll tell them about the man who sang the cows to sleep, who healed a goat, who built a bench and named it the Throne of Mu. You smile. It was a solid bench. He nods, bit wobbly. You glance once more at the pasture. The cows are lined up at the fence, not mooing, not moving, just watching. Calliope dips her head. You return the gesture. Then you take your first step away. Not up, not aloft. Just forward. Into the field. Past the cows. Through the olive grove. Toward the ridge. Admetus walks with you. No words. Just footsteps. The sun lifts a little higher. The trees catch fire with light. A breeze stirs the grass. At the top of the ridge, you pause. This is the spot where you first saw the estate, where you met Admetus, where Charos barked at your ankles like you were a threat to public order. You turn. Admetus offers his hand. You clasp it, then release it, then walk into the light. No thunder, no flash, no divine fanfare, just sky and sun and silence. Historians still argue what happened next. Some claim Apollo vanished into the clouds, resuming his rightful place on Olympus as if he'd only stepped out for a stroll. Others say he walked into the horizon and became a wandering melody, still heard in rustling fig leaves and sleepy cowbells. One fragment, burned at the edges, says that a man with a golden lyre was seen years later, tending a small orchard, humming lullabies to the bees. But no one knows for certain, except maybe one king and one very expressive cow, and a small village with a crooked bench, a shrine that smells of mint, and a yearly festival where children still sing that ridiculous hymn about golden elbows. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind blows just right, the fig tree hums. The cows are quiet. The villagers too. No one declares a mourning period. No statues are built. No official proclamations are made. But the absence settles across the estate like a soft wool blanket. Heavy, warm, just a little too quiet. The fig tree doesn't creak quite as often. The cows graze more slowly, as if waiting for a melody that doesn't come. The shrine stays simple. No new offerings, just the old ones still tended, dusted, rearranged by gentle hands. But life does go on. Timandra keeps the kitchen running with military precision. Children chase each other past the olive groves. The cows continue to be cows, eating, sleeping, occasionally sneezing dramatically. And Admetus? He's different. Not visibly, not in the way he walks or rules, but in the way he listens, the way he looks up at the stars a little longer each night, the way he holds the flute a little more confidently now, even if he still plays like he's charming a snake made of bees. One evening, he sits by the fig tree with a parchment in his lap. It's a song, not yours. His. He's written lyrics. They're clumsy and honest. They rhyme sun with dun and cows with plows. But it works. He hums it once, softly. Charos, lying nearby, lifts his head and lets out one appreciative bark. The following spring, a child from the next village visits the estate. She points at the shrine. "Who's that for?" A local boy replies, "The cowherd." "What did he do?" He shrugs. Kept the cows calm, played music, maybe fixed the weather once. "That's it?" the boy thinks. He also made the king laugh, and he glowed sometimes, but not in a weird way. The girl nods. "I like that." They light a candle. It flickers gently, even in the breeze. At the next Equinox festival, no one tries to juggle cheese. This is considered a great improvement by all involved. Instead, they gather around a low stone stage built near the pasture, where the cows can still watch. They play music, Admetus on flute, a few brave children on lyres. No one is particularly in tune, but that's part of the charm. They sing songs you once played, songs the cows remember, and a few new ones. One is called The Cow Who Wandered and Came Back Anyway. It's adorable and oddly catchy. That night, Admetus returns to the fig tree. He sits on the same bench, the one still slightly crooked, the paint now faded. He looks up at the stars, and he speaks softly. To no one. Or maybe not. If you ever come back, he says, we saved your cup. Tamandra keeps polishing it, even though she pretends not to care. He pauses. There's a new calf, Calliope's niece, I think. We're calling her Shiny. You'd like her. She listens to the flute like she understands it, which is more than most mortals. He leans back. Anyway, I just thought I'd say thanks. For the year, for the songs, for being here. The wind rustles through the fig tree, a low, familiar hum. Admetus smiles. I know you're probably busy, but if you're listening, we're doing all right. Some say Apollo never spoke of that year again. Others believe he sang about it in secret, soft songs only the moon and cows could hear. But one thing's certain, he was remembered, not as a god of prophecy or plague or the sun, but as the one who showed up, the one who stayed, the one who listened. And in one small corner of Thessaly, when the wind shifts just right and the cows sway to an invisible rhythm, someone always whispers, he's still here. And now, dear listener, your journey's complete. The fire has dimmed to embers. The cows are curled into their soft, dreamless silence. The fig tree creaks only once, like it's tucking you in with a nod. You followed Apollo through a year of slow, sleepy days. From divine exile to morning cow counts. From lullabies hummed under moonlight to equinoxes filled with joy. And whether you were here for the history, the myth, or just the gentle company, know this, you were part of it too. Maybe you smiled at Calliope's sass. Maybe you learned a thing or two about the difference between being worshipped and being remembered. Maybe you drifted in and out, like a dream under an olive sky. And that's okay, because stories like this aren't meant to end with a bang. They end in quiet, in peace, in the rhythm of hooves and soft earth, in the last chord of a lyre played just for you. So let your breath slow, let your shoulders fall, let your mind drift like mist over pasture. You're safe now. There's no more adventure to chase, no riddles to solve, just the comfort of knowing that even the gods sometimes need to slow down, to herd cows, to learn names, to listen. Sleep well, traveler, and may your dreams be filled with fig trees, distant flutes, and golden elbows. End of script. Sweet dreams.